Across 1,000 mapped galaxies, stars went dark from entropy, but from war, fleets burned. Civilizations bled themselves dry against an enemy that did not tire, did not negotiate, did not stop. Ancient alliances fractured. Proud empires fell back system by system, counting losses in extinct suns. And through it all, there was one species that did nothing, humanity. For centuries, humans had remained neutral, observers. Traitors, soft-voiced diplomats with too many emotions and not enough ships. Their worlds were warm, overpopulated, messy. Their technology was serviceable but inelegant. No living war. Mine ranked them as a serious military power. The Virex called them fragiles. The Koth Dominion called them short-lived noise. The Oron Synod simply ignored them. So when the last defensive line at the Helier Rift began to collapse, expect the signal that followed. A transmission, unencoded, unencrypted, burst across all channels. This is the Terran Coalition. The voice said, "Human. Calm. Too calm. We are entering the war." The arrival, Commander Krell of the Koth Dominion was watching his fleet die when the sensors screamed. Hundreds, no, thousands of warp signatures tore open space behind the Allied line. Not sleek, not brutal and angular things. Their hulls scarred even before battle. Ships layered in armor instead of shields. Redundant engines, redundant reactors, redundant everything. Identify, Krell hissed, his mandibles clicking in disbelief. The answer came like T-R-N, T-O-I-L-T-O, Arfly, Tino, Radal, T-O-I-F-A, Tevi. What kind of fools announced that? One of his aides whispered. Then the humans opened fire. They didn't form ranks. They didn't maneuver for honor or symmetry. They surged forward like a tidal wave, overlapping fields of fire. Kinetic rounds screaming through vacuum at relativistic speeds. Missiles didn't seek single targets. They split, reformed, and detonated inside enemy formations. Human ships rammed crippled vessels rather than pull back. One lost its entire protoplasma fire and kept accelerating. Why are they not withdrawing? T-Krell demanded. The answer came not from sensors, but from intercepted human chatter, or Earth. For Luna, for my kids. Don't stop. Don't you dare stop. Cut the enemy line. Unstoppable for 3 centuries. Broke. Monsters who bleed. The Oron Synod had believed emotion be weakness. They learned otherwise on the ash world of Quarus 9. The Oron defenders were prepared for precision strikes, for surgical warfare. What they got was human infantry landing in firestorms, drop pods slamming into the ground like meteor impacts. Some pods never opened. The humans inside were already dead. The rest charged anyway. They fought wounded. They fought burning. They fought screaming names into the smoke, names of places long destroyed by the war humanity had not been part of until now. An Oron War priest watched a human soldier drag himself forward with one arm gone, detonator clenched in his teeth. Why? The priest demanded over open comms. You cannot win this skirmish. You will die. The human looked up. Blood obscured half his face. He laughed, a broken, horrible sound. Yeah, he said, but you'll die first off. The explosion erased the command bunker. Later, Oron philosophers would struggle to describe what they had seen. Creatures who felt fear and acted anyway. Creatures who mourned none and kept fed. Creatures who turned grief into fuel. Not warriors, predators with reasons. Rage is a weapon the enemy adapted to shields. Humans switched to kinetics. The enemy adapted to kinetics. Humans overloaded reactors and turned ships into bombs. The enemy adapted. Humans changed the rules. They lured fleets into gravity wells and collapsed stars. They used hacked civilian comm networks to coordinate ambushes. They fought with algorithms written by artists and Lunax and veterans who no longer slept. At the Siege of Nalth Prime, a Varex Grand Admiral finally cornered a human fleet. You are irrational, he broadcast. Your losses are unsustainable. Surrender. But the human admiral's reply was quiet. You burned our colony ships. You killed refugees. You made this personal. A pause. We don't surrender when it's personal. Every turn ship cut engines simultaneously. For half a second, there was silence. Then space folded as thousands of human Marines jumped without ships, using experimental short-range warp harnesses, appearing inside enemy vessels. The battle lasted 6 minutes. The Virex never used the word. Crashing it, they replaced it with a Nuffiner. Terra V. What the galaxy learned? They learned that humans do not fight for glory. They fight for names etched into dog tags, for photographs taped inside helmets, for worlds they refuse to lose. They learned that humans will retreat, only to come back angrier. That they will negotiate, only if there is something left to save. That if cornered, they will burn everything, including themselves. An ancient Koth general summarized it best in his final report. Do not mistake their emotion for focus. It is memory. It is a promise. The galaxy had been at war for so long that no one remembered what peace felt like. Entire civilizations had been born beneath emergency sirens and died beneath orbital fire. Once confident in their immortality, were now exhausted shadows clinging to collapsing front lines. Every major power had committed everything. Fleets, warriors, forbidden weapons, and still the war was being lost. The enemy did not need a name anymore. It was simply the Devourer, an unstoppable force that learned faster than it could be killed. Plasma weapons became useless, shields failed. Strategies that had endured for millennia were dismantled in months. One by one, the great species of the galaxy realized the same terrible true extinction was no longer a distant fear, but an approaching certainty. And through it all, humanity remained silent. The humans had joined the galactic community late and cautiously. Their worlds were crowded and noisy, their politics chaotic, their emotions embarrassingly visible. They argued too much. They felt too deeply. They lacked the elegant starcraft and ancient wisdom of the elder races. When the war began, humanity declared neutrality and withdrew behind its borders. For centuries, they traded, observed, and mourned the losses of others from afar. Many believed the humans simply lacked the strength to fight. That belief shattered the day space itself screamed at the fractured remains of the Karos front, where the last Allied fleets were preparing for a final, hopeless stand. New warp signatures erupted by the thousands. They did not glide into existence like civilized fleets. They tore their way into real space violently, leaving radiation scars and gravitational shockwaves behind them. The ships that emerged were ugly, blocky, and heavily scarred, their hulls layered in armor instead of shimmering shields. The first human transmission echoed across every channel. We are done watching. The Devourer reacted instantly, redirecting fire toward the newcomers. It did not matter. Human ships did not maneuver defensively. They charged. They absorbed hits that should have crippled them and kept accelerating. When weapons overheated, they fired anyway. When shields failed, they rammed. When reactors went critical, captains steered directly into enemy formations and detonated without hesitation. Alien commanders watched in disbelief as human fleets fought like living weapons, unconcerned with survival, focused only on destruction. There were no calls for retreat, no pleas for mercy. Human communications were filled with voices shouting coordinates, names, curses, and final messages to families they knew they would never see again. On the surface of dying worlds, human soldiers descended in fire. Drop pods slammed into battlefields already lost, disgorging infantry that advanced through artillery barrages without breaking formation. Unwounded humans were dragged forward by their comrades. Those who could no longer walk detonated themselves beneath enemy armor. The aliens defending those worlds had never seen soldiers who continued to fight after bones shattered, after organs failed, after hope itself should have died. Capture transmissions revealed the reason. They took Earth colonies. They killed civilians. They made it personal. The elder races began to understand too late. Humanity was not fighting for conquest, not for territory, not for pride. They were fighting for revenge, for survival, for the simple, terrifying refusal to let their people be erased. Their emotions, once mocked as weakness, fueled an adaptability no machine intelligence could predict. Every defeat taught them something. Every loss made them angrier. The Devourer learned fear. Human tactics changed daily. When the enemy adapted energy weapons, humans switched to kinetic annihilation. When that failed, they turned stars into bombs and gravity into traps. They abandoned doctrine entirely, replacing it with creativity born of desperation. They did not seek victory without cost. They sought victory at any cost. The war ended suddenly. Enemy fleets vanished from contested space. Entire command nexuses were annihilated in a single coordinated human strike that no other species had imagined possible. The devourer did not surrender. It fled. For the first time in its existence, it withdrew. In the aftermath, the surviving species gathered in silence as human representatives arrived at the Galactic Council. They bore no symbols of triumph, only scars, only grief, only resolve. The galaxy had learned its final lesson. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was restrained. And once unleashed, they were something far more dangerous than any monster the galaxy had ever faced. For most of recorded galactic history, humanity existed as a footnote, not an enemy, not ally, just a presence, small, loud, and strangely fractured. When the elder races cataloged emerging species, humans were marked with annotations that bordered on dismissal, shall live, emotionally stable, unstable, politically divided. Their territories were dense clusters of overworked systems, their communications flooded with internal arguments, their leaders changing far too often to inspire confidence. Enough. To the galaxy, unity meant strength. Humanity had none. They fought among themselves constantly. Even during first contact, human nations could not agree on a single flag or voice. Some embraced alien trade, others resisted. Their networks were chaotic, their cultures wildly inconsistent. A species that could not govern itself, the elders concluded, would never govern the stars. Militarily, they were unimpressive. Their ships were functional but inelegant, lacking the graceful energy lattices of the Virax or the living hulls of the Oron. Human weapons relied heavily on brute force rather than precision. Kinetics instead of refined plasma, armor instead of advanced shields. Their fleets were small, their doctrines outdated, their simulations unimpressive. When the Great War began, the decision to exclude humanity from strategic planning was unanimous. They would fracture under real pressure. A tactician had stated, emotion-driven species always do. Humanity's declaration of neutrality seemed to confirm every prejudice. While others burned, humans withdrew. They closed borders, they fortified their systems, and refused to commit fleets to the wider conflict. To the galaxy, this was not restraint, it was cowardice. Entire worlds fell while humanity watched from behind defensive lines, trading colonists as humanitarian aid, but no warships. Mockery followed. Among Virax officers, human-level response became slang for inadequate preparation. Oran philosophers cited humanity as proof that emotional intelligence hindered long-term survival. Even lesser species, clinging to collapsing alliances, questioned why anyone had ever uplift humans into the interstellar community. Yet beneath the surface, there were contradictions as the galaxy ignored. Humanity did not collapse under division. It endured. Their endless arguments did not fracture them completely. Instead, they refined them. Their political chaos produced constant adaptation. Where elder empires relied on tradition and precedent, humans rewrote their rules every generation. Where others sought stability, humans learned to survive instability. Observers dismissed this as inefficiency. They did not notice that every internal conflict made humanity faster at recovering. They did not understand human emotion. Fear did not paralyze them, sharpen them. Anger did not consume them and focus them. Grief did not weaken, bonded them. Humans argued because they cared. They fought internally because they refused stagnation. And when external threats loomed, history showed that those visions had a habit of vanishing with terrifying speed. Still, the galaxy saw only the surface. A divided species, a neutral species, an irrelevant species. Even as human colonies vanished at the edges of contested space, even as refugee ships vanished into silence, alien strategists assumed humanity would continue to endure quietly or die slowly. They believed humans would adapt individually, not collectively, that they would survive in fragments, not rise as a whole. No one asked the most important question: what happens when a species that evolved through constant internal conflict finally finds a single external enemy? By the time the galaxy began to realize its mistake, humanity's reputation was already changing, but not through diplomacy or speeches. It was changing in classified reports, in censored battlefield recordings, in the sudden fear threading through alien command channels. The species once dismissed as weak and divided was proving something far more dangerous. And humanity was not unified because it was peaceful. It was unified because it was waiting. The war had reached its inevitable phase, the one no strategist liked to name. Supply lines were collapsing faster than they could be rebuilt. Veteran fleets were reduced to skeleton crews piloting damaged hulls held together by ritual and hope. Across the galaxy, commanders stopped talking about victory and began discussing survival timetables, evacuation priorities, and which species would be remembered at all. At the Earthly expanse, the last major defensive coalition prepared to break. Admiral Sal of the Oran Synod watched the tactical display in numb silence. 3 fronts were failing simultaneously. The Devorah's forces were adapting faster than predictions allowed, bypassing shield harmonics and targeting command nodes with surgical cruelty. It was no longer a war. It was a harvest. Any reinforcements? Sal asked, already knowing the answer. No, replied the aide. The Virex fleets are destroyed. The Koth have withdrawn to protect their core worlds. No further responses, at a pause, then quieter. Humanity remains neutral. Sal closed his eyes. Of course they did. The humans always did. The order retreat was forming on his tongue when every sensor aboard the flagship screamed at once. Space distorted, not with the smooth, controlled signatures of standard warp emergence, but with violent ruptures, as if reality itself were being torn open by force. One signature became 10. 10 became 100, then 1,000. The display flooded with contacts, unidentified, massive, closing fast. For a single, stunned heartbeat, Sal wondered if the Devourer had evolved again. Then the identification codes resolved. Tehran, Kedon, ML, Fli, Disan, Tawar, Iao, Tanafaramadi. The bridge erupted into chaos. That's impossible. They declared neutrality. Those numbers, how did they hide that many ships? Human vessels tore into real space at full combat velocity, not forming traditional battle lines, but overlapping into dense, aggressive clusters. Their ships were brutal constructions of armor and exposed weaponry, scarred and asymmetrical, bearing no aesthetic unity except purpose. Heat signatures flared dangerously high. Power outputs exceeded safety margins by absurd degrees. Sal realized with a chill that these ships had not been turrets, they had been built to die. The first human transmission cut through the noise. No fanfare, no threats. This is Admiral Rise of the Terran Coalition. The voice said, steady and controlled. All Allied forces fall back behind our line. Sal hesitated. You're outnumbered. He replied, this enemy will. I know. Ray's interrupted. We've been counting. Before Sal could respond, the humans charged. They didn't probe, they didn't test. They accelerated directly into densest enemy formations, unleashing kinetic barrages that ignored shields entirely. Rounds punched through holes and detonated internally. Missiles split, rejoined, and altered course mid-flight in ways no known targeting AI should allow. Human ships took catastrophic damage and kept atmosphere, venting, and plasma as secondary weapons. The Devourer attempted to adapt. Humanity adapted faster. When enemy vessels began hardening against kinetics, human ships detonated proximity nuclear charges to flood space with debris and radiation. When that failed, they deliberately overloaded reactors and used dying ships as guided weapons. Human pilots did not eject, they adjusted trajectories. On open comms, Sal heard fragments of human chatter bleeding through. For home, for the ones we lost. Don't let them pass. But there was rage in those voices, but not madness. It was controlled, focused, terrifyingly disciplined. The Devourer hesitated. That alone marked the turning point. On the ground, human forces made planetfall on worlds already written off. Drop-pop smashed into enemy, controlled cities with no preliminary bombardment. Humans fought in streets choked with fire debris, advancing through zones no other species would have entered. They ignored casualties, stepping over the fallen without pause, not from cruelty but urgency. Every second mattered. Every meter gain mattered. Captured enemy transmissions revealed confusion bordering on panic. They do not retreat. They do not respond to suppression. They are using losses as momentum. Sal watched the battlefield shift in real time. Enough enemy formations began to fracture, not from superior firepower alone, but from unpredictability. Humans refused to fight the war that had been planned. They turned weakness into bait, chaos into strategy, sacrifice into leverage. Within hours, the Earth's expanse, lost for years, was reclaimed. By the end of the cycle, the Devourer withdrew from 3 sectors simultaneously. In the stunned aftermath, Sal understood the truth the galaxy had missed. Humanity had not stayed neutral because they were afraid. They had stayed neutral because once they entered a war, they would not stop. And now that they had crossed that line, the galaxy would never be the same again. Shock spread faster than any signal once humanity revealed itself. Not panic at first. Panic required understanding, but a deep, creeping disbelief that settled into the minds of alien leaders watching their battle reports write themselves in real time. The galaxy had spent centuries categorizing humanity as an emotional, divided, and strategically insignificant species. Those assumptions collapsed within hours. In the crystalline command spire of the Vyrix hegemony, high strategist Kithal Sal stared at the holographic projection in silence. Human fleets were advancing through regions previously declared unsalvageable. Not advancing cares violently, Vyrix doctrine prized efficiency, minimum loss, and elegant maneuvers. Humanity ignored all 3. Their ships plunged into enemy fire as if daring the universe to stop them. This cannot be sustained, one of Kithal's aides insisted. Their casualty rates exceed rational thresholds. Kithal did not respond immediately. He replayed the footage again. Human ships continuing combat after losing entire sections, crews sealing off burning compartments and redirecting power manually. He saw vessels detonating deliberately in the midst of enemy formations. They are not measuring costs the way we do, Kithal finally said. Across the galaxy, realizations took hold. The Oran Synod convened an emergency convocation, its members radiating unease. Oran warfare relied on prediction and psychological pressure. Humans seemed immune to both. Surveillance of ground combat showed human soldiers advancing into artillery zones, already mathematically defined as lethal, into death zones. An Oran war seer whispered, "And they do not slow." Another corrected it. A Theix alert captured human communications only deepened the horror. There was no war chant, no collective mantra. Instead, there were fragments, names, promises, snuff, laughter in the middle of gunfire. Emotion saturated every transmission, yet discipline never collapsed. The Synod struggled to reconcile the contradiction. Emotion was supposed to break armies. Human emotion forged them. In the Kath Dominion, Supreme Claw Marshal Drax issued a classified advisory to all commanders. It was unprecedented in tone. Do not attempt intimidation. The directive read, do not rely on morale collapse. Human forces interpret overwhelming fire as a challenge, not a did enough. Not reports from Kath front lines described enemy reactions bordering on ritual terror. When human troops breached fortifications, defenders abandoned positions that were still tactically sound. Veterans spoke of humans continuing to fight after losing limbs, of wounded soldiers dragging themselves forward to trigger explosives manually. Some claimed human besmiled for detonations. Drax dismissed none of it. The Diva itself, an intelligence that had never paused for fear, altered its movement patterns. It began avoiding human-controlled sectors entirely. Even when doing so, weakened its strategic position. Alien analysts flagged the behavior as unprecedented. The enemy is afraid, one analyst said, voice trembling. Not of our weapons, of them. Humanity's aggression was not mindless. That realization frightened the elder races more than any brutality. Humans adapted mid-battle tactics on the fly and exploited emotional cues in enemies that other species had long abandoned. They anticipated hesitation. They attacked command figures directly. They treated war as a personal act rather than abstract exchange of forces. In private chambers, alien leaders began asking forbidden questions. Had humanity always been capable of this? Had neutrality been a choice? And if so, why had they chosen to stop? Enough. The most chilling report came from a Vyrix listening post that intercepted a human fleet-wide transmission after a successful counteroffensive. The humans were not celebrated. They were listing losses. Names, thousands spoken aloud, one after another over open channel. After the list ended, there was a pause. Then a single voice. Thea, remember thou. Move out. No victory cry, no triumph, just continuation. Fear, true fear, finally settled in. Not the fear of defeat, but the fear of having fundamentally misunderstood another species. Humanity was not reckless, it was resolved. Not bloodthirsty, but relentless. They fought with the certainty of beings who believe there were things worse than death. By the time alien leaders acknowledged this truth, the damage was done. Humanity's reputation had transformed from irrelevant to unstoppable, from emotional to apocalyptic. The galaxy had not awakened a weak ally. It had awakened a sleeping war species, and every leader from the youngest coalition governor to the oldest empire lord understood the same terrifying lesson. Whatever humanity decided to do next, enough no one would be able to stop them. The first time the phrase was intercepted, alien analysts dismissed it as a mistranslation. We don't fight to win, we fight so you lose. It appeared in fragments of human battlefield chatter buried among Targan data and casualty reports. At first glance, it made no sense. War, as the galaxy understood it, it was a contest of objectives, territory seized, fleets destroyed, resources denied. Victory was measurable, loss was symmetrical. Humanity rejected that symmetry entirely. The realization dawned slowly and then all at once as alien commanders studied the patterns emerging wherever human forces engaged. Humans did not seek decisive battles in the traditional sense. They did not prioritize preserving infrastructure or maintaining elegant supply chains. They targeted morale, momentum, and certainty. They attacked not what was valuable, but what was irreplaceable. A Virex Tactical Council spent an entire cycle analyzing a single human campaign. The humans had abandoned 3 systems in deliberate retreats, allowing the enemy to advance uncontested. On paper, it was a disaster. In reality, every system left behind had been stripped bare, data cores wiped, factories sabotaged, orbits seeded with debris and automated mines. When the enemy arrived, they gained nothing, no resources, no strategic advantage, only hostile space that bled them dry. This is not retreat. The council concluded uneasily. This is denial, but on the ground, the pattern was worse. Human soldiers did not hold territory if holding it offered the enemy a future. Enough. They destroyed cities rather than let them be captured. They collapsed tunnels on themselves to prevent pursuit. They fought delaying actions with suicidal precision, buying time not for victory, but for the enemy to overextend and starve. Captured human question, shroud no confusion. You think winning means standing at the end, one prisoner told an Oran interrogator. Winning means you can't get back up. The interrogator did not understand until weeks later, when the entire Oran offensive stalled due to cascading failures humans had seeded months earlier. Human warfare treated loss as a resource. Alien doctrines prized preservation of force. Humans assumed loss was inevitable and planned around it. Their logistics were built on redundancy bordering on absurdity. Enough, their command structures decentralized authority to the lowest possible level, allowing units to continue fighting effectively even after total communication collapsed. More disturbing was their psychological endurance. Humans did not break when surrounded. They did not surrender when outgunned. Instead, they escalated, isolated units, launched raids, and sabotaged supply convoys and transmitted false signals designed to lure enemies into ambushes. Even when annihilated enough, they left behind traps that continued killing long after the humans themselves were gone. An Oran philosopher described it with horror. Enough. The weaponized inevitability. The human commanders spoke openly about acceptable loss in ways that chilled alien listeners. Not because they were callous, but because they were honest. Humans did not promise survival. They promised purpose. We're not here to come back, a human captain told his crew before a deep strike mission. We're here to make sure they don't either. The phrase spread. Enemy morale plummeted as reports accumulated of human units that fought to the last individual. Not in glorious stands, but in messy, brutal engagements that left nothing intact. Victory over humans fell hollow. Every battle won came with consequences that compounded over time. Every human defeat carried a price the enemy would pay later, somewhere unexpected. Devourer, an intelligence designed to calculate optimal outcomes. In the face of this mentality, its projections assumed rational actors seeking survival. Humans accepted death as a tool. Not casually, not recklessly. Deliberately, that was the difference. A Virex commander summarized the problem in a transmission that would later become infamous. "They do not care if they lose," he said. "They care if we do." By the time the galaxy understood this philosophy, it was already embedded in every human operation. Humanity had reframed war itself. Victory no longer about banners or borders. It was about leaving the enemy with nothing. No strength, no certainty, no future worth continuing toward. And facing an opponent who fights not to win, but to ensure your defeat, the galaxy learned a final, brutal truth. There is no defense against someone who is willing to lose everything, so long as you lose more.